This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun being Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
What happened yesterday? Wow. UCLA and Southern Cal, I never knew could have such an impact on college sports in general. If you saw that coming, you are a smarter man than I, smarter person than I am. I know we saw it last year with Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. But Texas and Oklahoma are a lot closer to Texas A&M, who was already in the conference, right? Have you guys seen the ridiculous map of the Big Ten with UCLA and Southern Cal now joining in? It could not be more ridiculous geographically. I mean, I guess if all the teams were just SUNYs in the Big Ten, just in New York, maybe in Maine, that would be it. But it is so ridiculous. It is a cluster over here and then boop, boop, LA. Poor Pac-12 fans. Poor Big 12 fans. Poor ACC fans. The SEC is the only other conference yesterday besides the Big Ten that didn't go to crisis mode. And I get it. Welcome in. Hope your morning is not in crisis, even though college football, specifically college sports in general, kind of exploded a little bit yesterday. I'll try to keep it in perspective, not be too hyperbolic this morning. Jason starting us off at 7:24 on the YouTube live stream with a comment of Happy Friday. DC in 10 minutes after that, still 26 minutes before the show started this morning. And Anthony, the first true live comment. Nope, he was at 7:59 before we even got going today as well. Good morning. Good Friday morning, UFAs. He starts us off with. And I feel like the real easy take to make from anybody sitting in my perspective or in my seat with a microphone in front of them is to go the old man rant, start shaking the fist at the clouds. College sports just doesn't mean anything anymore. It's all about the dollars. Rivalries that mean nothing. Wah, wah, wah. Stop it. If you're making that take this morning, just stop it. It didn't start yesterday. This is just the latest of what major college athletics has been for years and years and decades and maybe ever. There are people in charge of athletics departments. It's their job to make sure the bottom line is strong, to make that department money. Southern Cal and UCLA had the opportunity to do that, and they took it, and they said, the rest of you guys in this sub-tier conference, in this 5 out of 5 in the Power 5 conference, sorry, suckers. Business decision. And man, what kind of impact is this going to have now? Because I think the next obvious question to ask, are we just destined now in major college sports for 2 super conferences? It was talked about last year, and I thought it was a little too soon, a little dramatic. It was massive news, Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, no doubt. but without any other major shift to follow it last year. I thought there's still 5 conferences out there. Yes, the SEC is the strongest, but 14 is not that much more than 12. I don't know why we're jumping to this conclusion that it's going to be all Power 5 schools split down the middle and 20-plus team conferences, and that's going to be that. And I thought that was a little too much. This makes me understand that line of thinking now. Was reading something yesterday talking about poor Rose Bowl, trying to keep that history alive, and I think the deal is 2 out of every 3 years they still get the Big Ten versus the Pac, whatever it is now. We'll go back to calling it Pac-10 now, because that's always easiest for me anyway. I mean, at least I give them credit for actually changing the name of their conference to match the teams, as opposed to the Big Ten or the Big 12, where it has made zero sense forever, as opposed to the Southeastern Conference that includes Missouri and Texas A&M. Makes no sense at all. Even with the ACC, Louisville, that's not close to the Atlantic coast. Are we destined for 2 super conferences? What was I guess my first question to ask is, what was your first reaction? Mine was just jaw dropping. Like, huh? Wait a second. I'm not shocked that the Big Ten got a couple of more big-time schools. You sure UCLA and Southern Cal? I understand our world is smaller than it used to be, right? Technology has brought us all together in the whole thing, but miles are still miles. Geography still exists. I know we can hop on planes and it's relatively simple to travel, but LA to Rutgers is in the Big Ten, I believe, right? That's New Jersey. That's our whole country. Oh, I didn't see that coming yesterday. But as a college football fan, I'm all for it. Bring it on. This is maybe just my general reaction, I think, to most news is, okay, let's adjust. Let's move forward. Let's evolve. Let's do it. Bring it on. I like to think I'm pretty open-minded, as opposed to, oh, I can't believe these 2 schools would do that to the Pac-12, or a pretty solid refrain I was reading yesterday in these articles commenting on this is the end of West Coast football. Having grown up in North Carolina, gone to school at South Carolina, and covered the SEC since 2003, West Coast football has not been a part of my life hardly at all. Right? I went out to Phoenix for Alabama and Clemson national championship. That's as close as I've gotten to the West Coast recently. It had nothing to do with West Coast football. It was Southeastern football played in not even a West Coast venue, but somewhere out west, right? West Coast football, 2016, I think, the last time there's been a West Coast team involved in the college football playoff, and it was Washington, and it wasn't close. And that's the next step by a lot of people, right? All right, what happens next? Who holds all the power right now? Is it Notre Dame? Oregon and Washington, I think, is a popular one out there. Who would have ever seen this coming? That this is the college sports version of Noah's Ark, right? 2 by 2 is how this college expansion has gone now. In the last 2 years, within a year, I guess within the last year, it was Oklahoma and Texas a little bit after this time last year, and now UCLA and Southern Cal. What a strange world college sports is. I mean, how these calls went right? How did it go? I mean, we still don't know the whole story, and I don't know if we'll ever know the whole story between Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, the border rivals there, the Red River rivalry, which I can never get out of my mouth without sounding like Elmer Fudd. They was met at a steakhouse or something in Dallas, and you know what? We'd like to make more money. The Big 12 ain't going. They're not cutting it here. Why don't we give old Sankey a call? Let's see what the SEC's got to say. You want to partner up there, partner? How did it work with UCLA and Southern Cal? They meet at some kind of upscale LA restaurant? Surely not, right? Where you're all about being seen and your image and the whole thing. Is that so stereotypical of a Southerner thinking about LA? But how does that work? Because, the story is that the schools contact the conference, not the other way around. The other way around would have a bunch of legal ramifications, tampering or whatever. There are, I think, appropriate guidelines out there that prohibit that, right? But whoever was writing these things didn't think that, these schools would be smart enough then to pair up and go to conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten, the two big dogs who are making all the money, say, hey, we want some of that action. Cut us in. We know we are valuable. I mean, this has a completely parallel to this old golf conversation we've been having recently, right? The golfers got more valuable than they felt the PGA Tour, the deals that they were getting. Clearly, some guys brought a lot more value to tournaments than other guys, and yet everybody was getting the same kind of deal. You still had to perform to get paid. But wait a second. 80% of these fans came to see 5 or 10% of the golfers. So for those 5 or 10%, they're looking around saying, this isn't quite working for me. And then you get another offer coming at you of loads of money. Again, don't blame them. I'm one of those that doesn't jump quickly to an emotional response typically, especially for something like this. Because I love college football. I come at it from the college football fan perspective. So I think, and maybe too, I have to take this into consideration. Growing up, going to Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturdays during the fall, I saw what being an independent school was, right? I know it's hard for a lot of people to even fathom, especially if you're 30 or younger, I would imagine, how that was a thing for some relatively big-time programs, right, that weren't Notre Dame. It's just been Notre Dame for the last couple of decades doing this, right? But I'm talking about Miami, Virginia Tech before they joined the Big East, South Carolina, obviously. I'm trying to think of others that were out there. BYU was a big one for forever. Like, they just didn't have a conference affiliation. And you go back and look at some of those schedules for the Gamecocks, and they were pretty good. Notre Dame and Florida State went and played at Miami. There's some big-name schools and still big-time games. Shane Beamer always talks about the home-and-home matchups between Virginia Tech and South Carolina. I was at those too. It's just not the way that college football had to work at that point. You didn't have to have a big-time conference affiliation to have a big-time college football program. And then 1995 happened, and South Carolina did join the SEC. And that changed things, from my perspective, for the better in so many ways for the University of South Carolina as a whole. Like you look at Columbia in 1995, you look at Columbia now, obviously it was going to evolve, you assume improve no matter what, but at the rate it has, I mean, what was the SEC payday last year or 2020, 2021, I think is the last time we have the data for it. It's like mid $50 million per school, I think. That was the payout. A crazy number compared to anything that was going on back then or anything that has happened, really. So just to come out and say, oh, this is bad for college athletics and it's all headed in the wrong direction, I think that's just an easy knee-jerk naysayer perspective on life. That's not how I see it. At the same time, I do love a good rivalry, man. The fact that we haven't had Texas and Texas A&M in college football. Was it Kansas and Missouri was the basketball example, I think, that's used out there. The fact that those don't happen, it's a dang shame for sure. But if you think it's just major college athletics, then you haven't been paying attention. Presbyterian and Newberry played for the old Bronze Derby forever. And then, well, they've had shifts in conference and divisions and weren't able to play their rivalry. I think the best example for us in South Carolina of, oh, yeah, it's not all about just major athletics and rivalries. Every college and university athletic department out there has been affected, has had to evolve in some way, and is looking for the best deal out there, just like the rest of us, almost like they're unrestricted free agents, even though clearly there is some restriction out there, but Southern Cal and UCLA certainly acting like it yesterday. Jason reminding us a lot of independent football teams played basketball in the Metro. Oh, yeah, that old Metro conference, man. With Memphis back in the day, Louisville. Those are the ones that stick out to me. Virginia Tech, the Del Curry days. Feel free to throw some more names out there. Notre Dame, the big winner yesterday. What a joke, Trey says. So when you say what a joke, what do you mean exactly, Trey? That to me you can't wave the SEC flag and then now turn around and say, oh, Big Ten, how dare you? Or what are you doing to college football, Big Ten? What a joke this is. SEC stole Texas and Oklahoma. The SEC is the first one to come up with a conference championship model with two divisions and really reset college athletics at the top. So, if you're going to be a blame guy, I think the SEC probably deserves most of the blame if you're going to come at it from that perspective. Notre Dame says just that, Trey, back in on the Notre Dame thing, just that they want all the perks of being in a conference without being in one. The Big Ten is the reasonable fit. Okay, but they can be different. They've proven that they live in a separate world than anybody else. It's crazy, no doubt about it. And Notre Dame does have so much power right now, right? So let's get into this from the conference or the South Carolina perspective. What does this mean for the Gamecocks? To me, it only makes things look better for the University of South Carolina that they're in the SEC right now. They've already done this. They've already been a part of a conference that has expanded to the next round. We've already talked about making the adjustment for the schedule moving forward with Texas and Oklahoma. And Greg Sankey and the powers that be at the SEC have a plan for what's next, if that includes bringing in more teams and making it an absolute super conference. Because everyone wants to be a part of either the SEC or the Big Ten right now. It's the other team in the state of South Carolina that had to really evaluate where it was yesterday, because the Pac-12, the clear loser in all of this yesterday, but the ACC ain't far behind, because they got farther behind both major conferences in college athletics in a big way. And so now a lot of national articles I read yesterday also brought up Clemson and what do you do? And I saw some Clemson fans out there saying for the first time ever, I actually think Clemson might leave the ACC. Trey says, for sure, the SEC is to blame as well. Expansion is a problem. Once again, the NCAA just letting it happen. It's certainly fascinating. But I think we have a misperception of the NCAA that's just the schools, man. That's all it is. It is the inmates running the asylum. There is not some overseer that says, no, you can't do this. It's a lot like that Roger Goodell testimony with Congress the other day. Hey, why don't you just kick Daniel Snyder out as an owner in the NFL? Guy who works for the owners in the NFL. You know how it works, man. So now where we go from here is the really fascinating part for me. What should Clemson do? You know a lot of Clemson fans. I know a lot of Clemson fans. The last thing they would want to do is admit we need to go to the SEC because they've taken so much crap through the years from Gamecock fans specifically about how weak their conference is and how they play the cupcake schedule. And there is a lot of pride from an ACC perspective. I mean, the South Carolina having been in the conference and then jumping out, and so much has connected, right? Even before my lifetime. But Clemson having been there, and the ACC is a very proud conference from a basketball tradition standpoint, especially. What does the ACC do? So a lot of people saying, you got to get Notre Dame in there now. No, Notre Dame ain't going to the ACC. Why? Why? If anything, yeah, they're looking at the Big Ten and saying, all right, what can you give us? Because remember, you got to trump their contract with NBC, their individual contract with NBC. They ain't sharing it with anybody. They don't have to. That's the world Notre Dame has lived in forever. And it's why they've been able to be on their own and why the ACC, and maybe one of the all-time weakest moves ever, said, yeah, we'll have you in our conference. You don't want to play football with us? Okay. You're that valuable to us without the true value of your school. We'll take it. So what should Clemson do? I'm wondering what you guys think out there, because that's a tough spot, man. They're clearly, and this is what these national articles, this is not a South Carolina thing. This is a national perspective. Clearly, Clemson runs the ACC right now from a value standpoint because of their dominance in football in recent years. It's just fact. And their dedication to the football program as well, how many resources they put in, they deserve all the credit, right? So, okay, they could bring a lot of value, but it's that ACC thing that they're signed up. Their media rights are locked up until 2036. The ACC thought they did a great deal. Long-term stability, right? In a climate where things in college athletics pretty volatile all over the place. So you want to lock everybody up, smooth sailing, get a really good deal with ESPN, and do it for the long term. That happened. And now Clemson is stuck to a certain degree. Now, all of those schools are stuck watching the Big Ten and the SEC just fly by them from a money standpoint. Fly by them. So for Clemson, what do? You just sit there? No way, you just sit there, right? But I don't think there's a lot of attraction from their standpoint to say, hey, yeah, we want to see what we can do to get in over here for the SEC. or the Big 10 or Big 12 or whatever it would be. I mean, this time last year, basically, I know it happened a little later, I think, in the calendar year. We were talking about how the Big 12 was going to disintegrate, and they recovered with some group of 5 schools hopping in their league. And as we sit here today, they seem a lot more stable than the Pac-12, certainly. What do they do now? Do they stand pat? They good? Because you got those 10 schools left that don't have many options out on the West Coast. You can't just, I mean, you can, I guess. You're just going to get Boise State, San Diego State to fill Southern Cal and UCLA's shoes when those 2 big boys weren't doing a whole lot for your conference to begin with. I get it. Southern Cal especially, the belle of the ball there for Pac-12. And from a money standpoint and the whole thing. But we all know where that conference ranked kind of in the pecking order. And then you can't just fill in a couple of more teams, a couple of of programs that were much below the level of UCLA and Southern Cal. I mean, I guess you can to keep your conference, but why would Oregon stick around for that? Why would Washington stick around for that? And now the story goes, if Oregon and Washington pair up a lot like Texas and Oklahoma, a lot like UCLA and Southern Cal, well, then they're really screwing their in-state schools, who they're paired up with kind of in a much lower level, right? The traditional rivalries, the old Apple Cup, the Civil War. Washington State and Oregon State may be feeling the effects of yesterday's move more than anybody. Arizona State and Arizona, right up there. The most recent additions to the Pac-10 back in the late 70s, I think it was, before the latest round of expansion of Utah and Colorado got the Pac-12 there. Utah and Colorado, what are they thinking? Guys, that wasn't much of a run. 12 years? That's all we got out of this? So I don't know about a complete reset, but it seems pretty close now. And Clemson had definitely affected. And I think it's really hard to tell as we sit here right now what kind of effect it will be completely. Other than feeling really unsteady, I would imagine. Really unhappy right now with their spot in this conference alignment or realignment. Because we've all seen the Power 5 break off coming in the NCAA, right? That Power 5 teams just operate on a different level when a school like Central Florida can go undefeated in football and not have a chance to sniff a national championship. Something ain't right. And college football has always been messy to a certain degree. There are other examples in history. Auburn went undefeated one year. There are plenty of examples out there. We used to have the co-champs, an AP and a UPI champ, and the whole thing. It has never made a lot of sense logically. Never been the most rational sport out there. But now to have a conference that goes from New Jersey to LA, that's nuts. I mean, I thought it was nuts when Missouri joined. I'm sure there are people out there that thought it was nuts with Arkansas and in the Southeastern Conference who used to be in the Southwestern Conference. Texas A&M and Texas now in the Southeastern Conference. It's pretty nuts. Oklahoma. But yesterday's news, man, did not see that coming. UCLA, Southern Cal joining the Big Ten. The Big Ten, remember that alliance thing they did, which we all laughed at the beginning, right? Especially from an SEC perspective. The Big Ten was joining forces with the ACC and the Pac-12 to make sure basically that they weren't going to get taken advantage of by the SEC moving forward. I guess alliances mean different things to different people, right? It was convenient for the Big Ten at the time, convenient for Southern Cal and UCLA, and until it wasn't, and then it was gone. So it makes some of our discussion seem really nearsighted. The this is classic. The 1 week I was giving the ACC some credit, right? Good for the ACC going to the 3-5-5 model, and they released the 3 permanent opponents this week, and said I think they were out in front. They actually set a trend. It looks like the SEC is going to need to go to that 3-6-6 to keep fans relatively happy, to keep some continuity in the conference with all the teams running through and the whole thing. And then this. And Justin says, Oregon and Washington are on the clock. Agreed. What do they do? What would you do if you're Oregon and Washington? Because it's easy to start thinking about the logistics, right? Man, you're in the Big Ten and you're out on the West Coast. That is a ton of travel for a ton of programs that most of us don't care very much about, right? The Olympic sports, the non-revenue generating ones. How's that going to work? From a bottom line, how's that going to work? But the big payday is big enough, I think, where schools like this, we'll figure that out later. We'll worry about the small potato later. This is the big juicy steak that you got to jump at if you're UCLA and Southern Cal, how they looked at it clearly. And a result too, or part of a result of a bad media rights deal, and this is what it all comes down to, the money, right? The money that these schools, these conferences agreed to with their TV deals. Well, the SEC just came up with their own network, right? Big Ten came up with their own network. I know the Pac-12 eventually did as well, but they just weren't getting paid nearly as much. And it was finally running out. Here, Larry Scott gets the blame and goes down maybe as the villain in all this from the West Coast perspective, and not getting these schools enough money on their last media rights deal. And it was supposed to, coming up soon, supposed to be a new one. And now UCLA and Southern Cal won't be a part of it from the Pac-12-10 perspective. And so what do? That's why Justin says Oregon and Washington are on the clock. A ton of power right now. Both national brands. Oregon a little bit more so right now than Washington. But remember growing up with Steve Empman was the guy at Washington, Jake Locker more recently. They've had some big-time names, some big-time football team. Oregon was completely irrelevant when I was growing up, but Phil Knight will change things, and hooking up with Nike and becoming the national brand. They played for a couple of national championships, I think, in the last decade. They have been more than relevant. And now, how do they use that power, I guess, is the question. I am trying to refrain from using the power for good or evil and painting UCLA and Southern Cal as evil in this thing, like Texas and Oklahoma. You take the best deal that's out there. And, yeah, it requires change. And that's what we've got in college football. Ultimately, from the fan standpoint, I just want to see more good games. That's it. More good games. And I think having these super conferences, that's what we got. That's certainly what South Carolina got joining the SEC. We got an SEC championship game. That was a game that didn't exist beforehand. It was more good games. Other conference championship games. More good games. College football playoff. An extra round. More good games. That's all I want to see from a selfish fan perspective. I think we're going to see this for UCLA and Southern Cal. We're going to see it for Texas and Oklahoma. But I don't know about the rest of those 10 teams out there in the Pac-10, 12-ish. Don't know. The ACC perspective, you're going to get more good games, or what is going to happen from here. Absolutely fascinating, and love that this news is going down in the month of July. I think it's hilarious that that's how June ended, and we start July, typically the slowest month of the college sports calendar. Man, it's so slow they made up. They had to push back media days in there just to get something going, right? And now you got this for the second straight year. Last year was Texas and Oklahoma, and it was, oh, man, can you believe they're doing this to the Big 12? They're blowing it up, and the SEC just greedy and leading the way. I think the national perception in a lot of ways. This one is even more cutthroat just because Texas A&M was already in the SEC. Texas and Oklahoma can kind of touch them, right? They're right there. They're not too far. But this UCLA and Southern Cal thing to the Big Ten, wow. I mean, just regions completely irrelevant. History and everything else, rivalries, just nope. Cold, I think is what I call it. Cold or cutthroat, I think is what I read the most yesterday about this move from UCLA and Southern Cal to the Big Ten. So the fact that the SEC still trying to figure out how exactly they're going to do their schedule with Texas and Oklahoma, maybe it's a bit moot now, or you're thinking a little bit bigger. Maybe you're thinking about more expansion in the whole thing. We'll continue to discuss that. Wanted to play a recent comment from G.A. Mangus, former Gamecock assistant coach, about the possibility of playing 9 games, his perspective on that. Take a quick break here. Be right back after this. You're watching Tim Hill Unrestricted. You might be listening to it as well. Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent.
I never got any joy beating somebody's ass by 50 points and giving them a paycheck, just to come get a W. I think that's ridiculous. There's a lot more joy, and if you're a competitor, I'd much rather play, like our 2-year rotation. Everybody was complaining, oh man, South Carolina's got Alabama coming up. Well, we gave them a tussle in Tuscaloosa, and then the next year we beat them and beat the hell out of them in Columbia. And that was a lot more fun than playing kids-geek crap.
All this is, I think we're going to get more big-time matchups. I think we're getting less of teams coming in, smaller schools coming in to larger schools for paychecks and games that we overlook, and from a national or even regional perspective, and we turn the channel. We look somewhere else. Glad more of you weighing in on this thing. The cruise control routes to the championship game are going bye-bye for Clemson, DC says. And a resident Clemson fan, Troy, saying the last 2 years has been a kick in the gut to traditionalists. No doubt about it. But let's not pretend, Troy, that it's the first kick in the gut. I mean, Miami's in the ACC, Virginia Tech, in Florida State. I mean, if we want to go traditionalist, right? You're always evolving in some way, either moving forward or moving backwards in the college sports landscape. And the Power Five, there wasn't a Power Five. I never heard that growing up. So we've gotten to this point, kind of steadily moved to that place. But Troy's absolutely right. The last 2 years have been monumental moves for the SEC and the Big Ten now. And from the ACC perspective, especially, I can see why you would consider it a kick in the gut. I don't think Gamecock fans necessarily see it that way, because There's very little tradition that will get changed. I mean, the tradition of playing Vandy or Kentucky every year, if they're not one of the three perennial opponents, if the SEC moves to the 3-6-6 schedule, I don't think anybody's going to cry over that too much. The path to a national championship probably got more difficult for the Gamecocks. Adding Texas and Oklahoma in the league, adding the likelihood of playing one of those powerhouse programs. And even as I say that, Texas is not necessarily a powerhouse program anymore. I don't even know if I can say that. Oklahoma certainly is. So from the South Carolina perspective, what does this mean? I think it means that you have a greater appreciation for being in the SEC, maybe. Another newfound appreciation for being in the Southeastern Conference and being kind of at the forefront of this thing. This happened last year. Seen it. Been there, done that. I think it's a pretty easy evaluation to say you would prefer to add Oklahoma and Texas to your conference as opposed to UCLA and Southern Cal. But UCLA and Southern Cal are pretty massive additions to a Big Ten conference for so many reasons, right? I'm just thinking about it just from programs, right? Southern Cal and UCLA aren't scaring anybody in football really these days. But the UCLA dominance back in the day in basketball, the Southern Cal dominance in football through the years, all the Heisman Trophy winners. The Pete Carroll era most recently, now having Lincoln Riley. Also read an article yesterday, and I get it, we come at it from the fan standpoint. But man, this makes me, I think, resent the typical pitch of athletic directors out there or coaches even saying, yeah, it's all about the student athlete experience and the whole thing. I guess, well, it makes sense that the Elite 11 camp, it was wrapping up recently. I think a kid who's committed to Oklahoma ended up being named like the top quarterback out there. But someone was out there covering it. And so as the news happened yesterday, there's a guy who originally committed to Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley and then switched that to Southern Cal. And so now has gone from, in his mind, playing in the Big 12, playing in the Pac-12, now playing in the Big 10. And done much of anything except he really liked what a coach offered him and kind of attached himself to that coach. Oh, yeah, don't forget Southern Cal and UCLA in baseball as well. Yeah, for sure. Tremendous baseball programs historically, not there necessarily right now. The Pac-12 will be filling their spots with leftovers like Mark Kingston's doing to the baseball team right now, DC says. That's tough. Yeah, I don't know if the Pac-12 can do that. Like the Big 12 had to do that last year, but it wasn't the second time this had happened recently, right? This was a Texas and Oklahoma thing only at this point last year. There were rumors, or there was a bunch of speculation that it would seismically change all the college sports and it was going to be a domino effect in the whole thing. And the only domino effect you saw was the Big 12 filling those spots. And what, Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, one more that I'm sure you guys could tell me. Probably popping out. Houston, the other, I said Houston, didn't I? Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, one more out there who I'm not thinking of that I think was another maybe Mountain West school or something. But that's really small scale stuff compared to what we saw yesterday for sure. And now where some schools sit. Notre Dame at the top of the list, right? If the ACC the ACC's been putting the hard sell on Notre Dame forever to join the conference. They actually did join the conference kind of by COVID necessity for a year in football. The world didn't end. The ACC didn't become the best conference ever, but we saw what it looked like. And then Notre Dame went back to collecting their money as an independent and being just fine with that. And, hey, yeah, you guys take the leftover sports over there, the ACC. We're good. So I don't see this changing that at all. This would only change how much more Notre Dame would demand from the ACC, right? Notre Dame is more valuable to the ACC right now than it has ever been. Oregon and Washington have probably never been more valuable. Certainly they're more valuable to the Pac-10, what it is now, than they've ever been. But also maybe that much more attractive as a package deal out there. And with the SEC snag Oregon and Washington, the thought process is Oregon, the national brand, connected to Phil Knight, played for a couple of national championships in football recently. Pretty good programs across the board. Washington has the Seattle television market, a top 15 TV market, and some pretty good history throughout the years. The last Pac-12 team to play in the college football playoff more than 5 years ago. So, but would the SEC go there? I mean, if you're just talking about complete domination and 2 super conferences and you want to be kind of leading the way there, then absolutely you would, right? But man, what a world that would include. That would be clearly the signal that that's what the Power Five's doing. It's basically just going to split up. The other thought process is you go raid the ACC, right? You basically split it up. The schools kind of North Carolina and above go to the Big Ten. Everybody down below, and maybe Virginia Tech, since it's more of a football-focused school, you pull down to the SEC, including Clemson, Florida State, Miami, all those guys. What a world that would be, huh? So I guess, I love the pageantry of college football. I love history and rivalries, I think, as much as the next guy. But I think maybe one thing I don't like more than others is living in the past and being the remember when guy. And the old days so much better than what we got now. So that's how I'm approaching this thing. Not doom and gloom, not some kind of, hey, you guys just don't respect loyalty or history or that PGA Tour card they're trying to play these days. Because that goes all kind of ways, doesn't it? These conferences haven't gone out of their way to preserve a bunch of rivalries that didn't fit in their bottom line, that didn't make sense from a bottom line perspective. So let's not pretend that there are a bunch of pure loyal schools out there that have the best ideals in mind and aren't in it for the money. Now then you have to put some characters at the top of the list right now who seem to be in it in the money for the most, right? But where does your school fall? Like, where does South Carolina fall in there? South Carolina jumped at the chance to be in the SEC, just like Texas and Oklahoma did. They did it a bunch of years ago, a bunch of decades ago now. Gamecock fans are pretty happy with it, I think, by and large. I don't know how you couldn't be. So now what does Clemson do? You want to be the athletic director of Clemson. What? That's interesting timing, right? And we're talking about pairing up. I had the thought last night that Dan Radakovich had to be on the phone, former Clemson AD, with a guy that he kind of groomed for the position in Graham Neff, who's the AD now, and Radakovich down at Miami, and thinking, hey, if this is a Noah's Ark 2x2 thing in college sports now, Clemson Miami, pretty attractive pair. Should we pair up and see what's out there for us? And the big problem with that is that the ACC schools have their media rights locked in to that conference, whether they're in the conference or not, until 2036. But the thought is out there that, hey, maybe there are going to be 2 super conferences out there. The possibility of them getting that much more money and just paying the rest off, that might be within the realm of possibility. I don't know. Also, that these contracts have never really been challenged in court. And then with all this money at stake, if there's going to be a complete revamping of major college sports, maybe that's what happens next. Because I find this really hard to believe that we're only going to have the 2 isolated incidents here that we've seen now within a year. That we're just going to have just Texas and Oklahoma come to the SEC and just UCLA and Southern Cal go to the Big Ten, and some corresponding moves by the conferences that got left to fill those spots with lesser name brands. That's not a sustainable model. There's no way these are just 2 isolated incidents and the Big Ten is going to be able to be competitive now with Boise State and San Diego State. The gap just continues to get too big from a money standpoint. So I don't see that as last year. I could see it, right? It happened one time. It was 2 schools. They only expanded to 14. But now with another conference moving to 14, because why wouldn't the Big Ten have 14 schools in it? And another conference getting left with just 10. It was the Big 12 that had 10 and then filled it with 4 more teams, right? So just fascinating. So many ways, man. Yeah, I think the Pac-10-ish is the way I'm going to go with that from now on. Didn't see it coming and have really no clue where it's going to go. I think if anybody tells you otherwise, you got to turn around and ask, all right, so why didn't you tell me about Southern Cal and UCLA doing this? Why didn't you give me the heads up on that there, big guy? And for all the cynics out there that hate the world of social media and think that nothing can be kept under or out of the spotlight, right? There's nothing that can be without people finding out and the whole thing. How about this, man? Second year in a row, college sports bombshells right here in the middle of the summer. Texas and Oklahoma first, UCLA and Southern Cal next. Crazy, man. I mean, all credit in the world goes to anyone involved, the Big Ten, the SEC, those schools, for keeping this thing under wraps. That was the crazy part to me yesterday. Hopping on Twitter, seeing the reports of this maybe happening. And this is the first time I'd ever heard of it. Ever. And then hours later, the schools putting it out. Confirmed. The conference putting it out. Confirmed. Done deal. That's impressive. I mean, in this world where you get so many rumors and sources out there, so many heads up that things are going to happen, and then, weeks later they do happen. Crazy that this news of this magnitude can be kept under wraps and delivered kind of in a clean package type deal. And that's what it was yesterday, right? I mean, it's not clean for those schools left in Pac-10. I don't think they see it that way. But as far as the Big Ten, there weren't rumors. There weren't days of speculation. It was, hey, this might happen. Oh, it has happened. I mean, from the last show we did. If you would have told me this time yesterday that this is going to go down, I would say, you are crazy, sir or ma'am. That doesn't make any sense at all. Why? Why would the Big Ten go there instead of trying to get schools that make more sense, in quotes, whatever that is these days, right? No, they're going to go. They're going to try to get Notre Dame. They're going to try to. I mean, maybe they'll pair that with somebody else. Like, I don't know. I don't even know who would make sense, right? I can't even throw anybody else out there right now. Even though Lord Notre Dame and pluck Nebraska from. No, they already got Nebraska. That's right. They already stole them. I have no clue who I would have even suggested, but the fact that they went all the way across to LA and that UCLA and Southern Cal paired up like Texas and Oklahoma did, and now this is a trend in college sports. The obvious question remains, are we just destined now for two conferences? A big one, and I don't even know what you call the other one, right? Big something, because the numbers keep changing. And then you can't call it the Southeastern. You just call it the geographic. We go with the National and the American League. We just do that. And then you break it off in divisions that basically look like the old conferences. I have no clue. No clue where this is headed. But I do think we're getting more big-time college football games. That's what this is about, getting conferences in a position to generate more revenue from a TV standpoint, from a media rights standpoint, probably the best way to put it these days. So what does it mean for the Gamecocks yesterday? I think it was just affirmation or confirmation that being in the SEC right now is a good place to be, as opposed to where Clemson is in the ACC. I think second biggest hit, right behind the Pac-10 yesterday. Was the Pac-12 yesterday, I guess. Kind of switched, right? So what should they do? Again, I'm interested in hearing some thoughts. Morning to you too, Hope. Crazy day to be a sports fan, even in the state of South Carolina, which couldn't be much further away from that epicenter of LA yesterday that made all the news. But so many ramifications we can only kind of speculate will happen off of this. If I'm Clemson, I'm seriously, and I saw it on social media yesterday from a few Clemson fans, for the first time really feeling like they might leave the ACC. I don't know. Maybe the better question is, what does the ACC do? Because you're kind of stuck, man. You tried to get Notre Dame in for forever. You already made them a ridiculous deal and got all the other programs in except football. Now, if you bring football in, you no way Notre Dame's taking an even cut. They're way more valuable than that right now. And then how does Clemson agree to Notre Dame getting a much larger share than they got, right? Do you go to some sort of merit-based deal? Why would Notre Dame take that? Clemson hasn't made in the ACC, Hope says, but I get why they would make the move. Yeah, that's another way to look at it too. Maybe they, from another standpoint, you feel like you're good to go in the conference because your path to the college football playoff has been really easy, or has been easier than others. And college football playoff expansion, I think, was the thing that stuck out to me yesterday in that it's definitely coming. And the Big Ten and the SEC clearly have the best chances now of getting at-large bids, and no way they're ever going to agree to more automatic bids in that thing. So it would be a narrow road for any ACC school now, right? When you're seen as the third best conference at best, is your second or third team going to get anywhere close to the consideration that even a fourth or fifth team gets from the SEC or the Big Ten? Something to keep in mind, man. And as we hit the 9 o'clock hour here, rolling into hour number 2, maybe a good time to take a little quick break from the legend that is former Gamecock baseball standout Trey Dyson. Recently popped on with us and has a great plan for your healthy breakfast to get you going. Be right back after this. Trey Dyson.
Hash browns,
Wow.
oatmeal on top of the hash browns with just globs of brown sugar on it.
Wow. So you use the oatmeal as like gravy for your hash browns? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that way you can kind of be healthy. Like go away from the breakfast knowing that, hey, you just ate a healthy breakfast.
Fantastic. Might change your approach to breakfast this morning. There's still a little oatmeal on it. You'll be good to go. Wanted to give you guys a heads up and welcome in a new sponsor of the program, Freedom Primary Care. That's their name, and it's who I recommend you check out for sure. Got the scroll popping up on the video version of the podcast here. Freedom Primary Care, a primary care doctor, as you might imagine, who actually has the mindset right now of giving you the freedom to choose. And they want to work with you in what you feel the most comfortable way to get control of your health and to guide your health. And they know that it is you in charge of your health. They are responsible to you, not responsible for you. And that means a little bit more to me than it ever has, having gone through a situation where I had an employer tell me I had to do something for my health. And I never thought that would ever happen in my life. I know I'm not alone. And it's why I encourage you to give them a call at 803-627-2447. Integrative care, which means they have the traditional options for you, but they'll also have more natural-minded options. It's up to you to choose with them. They'll give you the information and present all of it for you, but work with you for comprehensive primary care. There are affordable memberships there, natural solutions. 803-627-2447. That's Freedom Primary Care. It's up in Fort Mill right now, but telemedicine options certainly available. So you can be anywhere and join Freedom Primary Care. And appreciate them sponsoring the program. If they support the show, you support them. It all works for everyone. Would be greatly appreciated. Let's get back into this monumental news of yesterday. Out of nowhere from my perspective, and I don't know anybody who said they saw this thing coming, with UCLA and Southern Cal joining the Big Ten. The question, are we now destined for two super conferences in major college athletics? DC weighing in with the ACC's like the ugly guy asking a hot girl to the prom, getting turned down to find out she ended up going by herself. I guess that's the ACC Notre Dame dynamic in DC's head. Okay, I can see that to some degree. The question also becomes like, why would you, as a conference, now buy so high with Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame, the stock couldn't be more valuable right now. They couldn't be in more of a position of power. Oregon and Washington, similar spots from the Pac-10-ish perspective as well, right? They could not be more valuable. If they were to jump ship right now, then how do you consider cobbling together a conference out of what would be left with the 8 teams? They stay in it, and I can see a Big 12-like conference with the Pac-10, but why do you want to be in that? Do you just take your chances? Because I'm not convinced yesterday's news is a precursor, is a clear sign that we're only going to have two super conferences in major college athletics moving forward. That to me would be too organized right now. I think there is way too much dysfunction out there. There's way too much individualistic thinking amongst athletic departments. This is, hey, we got to do what's best for us. Clearly, UCLA and Southern Cal weren't thinking about everybody else in their conference. They were thinking about themselves first, and they found a partner. Texas and Oklahoma, I think the exact same thing. Well, now Oregon at number 1 and Washington, I think at a pretty distant number 2, got to be thinking that as well. I don't know if Oregon thinks they need Washington. Washington, I think, certainly needs Oregon. But apparently this is the new trend of joining a conference just to keep the numbers even, right? You do it as a pair. And maybe from the money standpoint, you say, Oregon, all right, we don't really have a huge television market. Portland's not that big, but Seattle's pretty big. So maybe we should pair with Washington and jump. And that would make us look a little shinier than just Phil Knight's shiny, glowing yellow or green, whatever you want to call it, glow that is Oregon. So maybe that is the move. If that happens, then I feel like we are. I don't know what it's going to take for me. Is that the move that it's going to take? Because if 2 more schools leave the Pac-10-ish, I feel like that thing's done, right? We're no longer Power 5. I don't know what the rest would do, but I would think maybe just latch on to the Big 12 and make that thing grow that much more. Where does it go from here? Crazy to think about. And then, you guys remember the Rose Bowl, the big granddaddy of them all? To me, this is almost karma for being stuck in that old school mindset for as long as, I mean, they still are. They still are guaranteed 2 out of every 3 years to have a Big 10 and a Pac-12, Pac-10-ish school in there. And the whole rest of the world has gotten rid of that, right? And maybe, I guess, if you're a traditionalist, right, you're saying, well, they're the only one that is still sticking up for what college football should be all about and tradition and all that stuff. Okay. But to me, everybody has evolved except the Rose Bowl in a lot of ways. And I feel like this is a bit of karma coming out of LA for that. Like, this is the most LA thing ever, right? The most flaky thing. Like, hey, I don't care about you guys. It's all about us, and we're leaving. We're gone. We don't need you local people. You know, the bi-coastal natives have always blown my mind, right? You live in New York and LA, you just split your time, and it's just a 5-hour plane ride. And that's your life, New York and LA. It's crazy to me. But that's kind of what UCLA and Southern Cal pulled off yesterday. York joining in on the YouTube live stream right now. Appreciate all you guys participating on the live stream today. Doing it from the new 8 to 10 hours, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, where you can check out the video stream and live chat at the same time. The Twitters don't pop in automatically into the feed like YouTube and Facebook, so keep that in mind. If you've been ignored on Twitter before, that's why. But definitely try to keep up with that, and especially if you're someone who checks out the podcast after we do it live, be happy to get some comments on there retroactively the next day, because this is the ultimate July sports topic, right? 2024 is the date they put on Southern Cal and UCLA actually playing in the Big 12. Excuse me, the Big 10, which is going to be, you got to rename this thing now, don't you? How long are you going to stick with the Big 10? You going to just go with it? I mean, they've had more than 10 teams for a while now. They're just going to stick with it, huh? Big 12 at 10 teams, and makes my head hurt. We're going to have to get I'm hopeful that we'll get an overhaul of this thing. And again, at least I give the Pac-12 credit for changing the name to 12. And now you go back to 10, you're going to go to ish. We'll call them Pac-10-ish on the program from now on. But I don't know what it's going to take for me to automatically agree to be completely bought in on 2 super conferences outside of the massive news here the last 2 years. And last year didn't do it for me because it was I know it was 2 schools, but it was one move, right? It happened, and then there was a reaction. There was an action and a reaction, and that was it. A lot of speculation out there that there was going to be more to happen, and you could certainly argue that yesterday's news was another reaction to that. And I think you're right. But now the reaction here, well, the Pac-10ish has got to do something. But I don't think there were 2 schools in the Big 12 last year who were primed to make a move like Oregon and Washington are sitting right now. I'm trying to think as I was saying that out loud, what 2 schools would there have been? Kansas gets mentioned because of basketball, but basketball ain't moving the meter on these things. That's not why any of this is happening. This is all football driven. So I just don't think there were 2 other schools out there that it was obvious you could pair together that had as much to sell from the Big 12 last year at this point, behind Texas and Oklahoma, that Oregon and Washington have to sell now that UCLA and Southern Cal have ditched them, have dumped them. When the SEC goes supersized, I propose the name SEC 2C, short for C to C or coast to coast. I mean, I see what you're going. I see where you're going with there. Just to say that is difficult for me. SEC 2C. That's way too like R2D2 for me. But it makes sense. I see what you're saying. It's just that, well, it kind of makes sense, right? But the Southeastern Conference from C to C or coast to coast, it's geography doesn't even make sense. But it hasn't for a while now. So are you one of those people who saw the news yesterday and said, oh no? Did you say yes? Or I'm guessing you were probably somewhere in the middle there. Like, I don't even know if Southern Cal and UCLA fans would have said, yes, absolutely pumped about this news. I don't know if I guess the Big Ten commissioner's office had to be pumping their fist the most and saying, man, we got a coup here. This is big time news. Yes, we will remain a competitor with the SEC by doing this. But other schools in the conference, they feel kind of like maybe other SEC schools did last year. Like, okay, this changes things. This is different. I don't know if it's better for us, but it's better for the conference. And there has always been that in the SEC, by and large. Texas A&M still doesn't have that, right? They're like, hey, you can't bring Texas in here. We're going to go to the state legislature or whatever. That got calmed down pretty quickly. And I think they're learning what the SEC is all about. And you guys see that video recently of, it looks like a Texas A&M assistant coach or staffer at least on the field in a recruiting visit. It's like someone's cell phone video, probably a parent, I would imagine, talking about all the people in the suites are going to get them a lot of money. Will be interesting to see if anything comes of that. What Jimbo Fisher has to say about that next time he comes out and speaks. But massive news. The effects for the Gamecocks, next to nothing, right? Other than, I think, the old that Southeastern Conference thing happened a long time ago. We're in a secure spot, a rare secure spot, I think, amongst the Power Five right now. You had SEC schools and Big Ten feeling that yesterday. Maybe that was how other Big Ten schools felt as well. Like, all right, good, solidifying us. We're going to be in this conference for a long time. This conference is going to remain very relevant for sure. I think had to be the opposite feeling for Clemson yesterday. Oh, really? That had to be the response, right? I mean, that was kind of my response too. Really? From over there to over here? That's now a thing? Oh, okay. Wow. Well, they're already making a ton of money. Now that's going to be even stronger. And this changes that dynamic so much in my head. Like Big Ten football has always been cold weather, grind it out. Michigan, Ohio State, and Southern Cal, UCLA has always been Rose Bowl, Coliseum, warm weather, quarterbacks who surf, who just put away their surfboard to throw touchdowns, and Reggie Bush carving people up. Stories of O.J. Simpson on the football field, and then being completely tarnished. But Clemson's power being written about all over the place yesterday about carrying the ACC, the consistency of the college football playoff, how valuable they are to the league, and now what do they do, right? So if I had to rank them from a position of power, what yesterday's news did, keeping Southern Cal and UCLA out of it, right? Of like schools affected by the move and whose power grew yesterday. I think it's Notre Dame that grew the most, unfortunately. I had to put them one. In second, combined, I would put Oregon and Washington because the Pac-10-ish has to have them now. Has to, or that league disintegrates, I think. I don't see it happening any other way. And then right below them, I think I see Clemson because of what they've meant to the ACC in the last 10-ish years now and all these college football playoff runs and what that means from a money perspective, from a power perspective in this whole deal. That's what this whole thing's about, right? Pac-10-ish hasn't had a team in the college football playoff since 2016, I think it is, maybe 2015. Washington was the last one. And largely irrelevant and missing out on a lot of money. So you can't lose clearly your best program in Southern Cal. And then another top program, certainly Oregon and Washington probably have an argument against UCLA in recent history, let's say. But that LA market, you can't take that hit when you're the Pac-10 and continue on in any sort of meaningful way if you lose two more, if you lose two others at the top. Now, I think it'll be a lot like the Big 12 if Oregon and Washington stay, and then they fill in a couple more schools, Boise State, San Diego State, whatever it would be. Still would be completely kind of next tier. And I don't think we can call it the Power Five anymore. Do you? I think yesterday's news keeps us from calling it the Power Five. I think you could argue last year the Texas-Oklahoma news should have changed the way that we think about the Power Five. Because who is the power broker in the Big 12? It was always Texas, right? And then it was Oklahoma right beneath them. And those two are gone. I don't know who's left there to be the big boy in the conference. I don't think there is one. That's certainly not on their level. And the same thing out now in the Pac-10-ish. You want to try to sell me Oregon and Washington as power brokers. They're just not on the same level. So I don't think we have the Power Five anymore. I think I got to stop saying that. I think we got the top two, then we have the ACC, and then we got the bottom two as we sit here right now. And that's a rough spot for Clemson to be in. Because before this last round, before Texas and Oklahoma, before now Southern Cal and UCLA, I think the ACC was putting up a pretty good fight and was definitely competitive-ish from a Power 5 perspective and putting their product and schools out there. But now, clearly not. Just not. I don't think Clemson fans would argue that. I don't know how you can. And so the question is, where do you go from here, right? If they were to join the SEC, oh man, it's so hard to fathom just saying that out loud because it's been so ridiculous in my mind to hear that. You know, that's always been a discussion, right? Clemson, a football-centric school located in the Southeast, shares a lot of things in common with a lot more things in common with SEC schools than ACC schools. So are there conversations going on right now? Are they looking for the best partner? The closest one would be Georgia Tech. That doesn't make any sense. Florida State? Would they do that? Again, the relationship with Dan Radakovich as the Miami athletic director now. You do that and say, sorry, ACC, but it's that whole media rights thing sold away until 2036. Do you even have the option? Do you even consider discussing it? I think all things are kind of on the table right now if you're Clemson. Because you're so much more valuable than anybody else in your conference. And it was kind of exacerbated by yesterday's news, I think. I mean, that has been the case for a while now. But I guess the thought process was you just didn't see this coming. Southern Cal and UCLA having the gumption to just jump out of their conference and make that move. The media rights in a different spot, and they don't have to worry about any of that. So maybe that kind of makes this moot from the Clemson perspective. But I would find it hard to believe that you don't consider other options outside of the ACC. And I would have to assume the ACC office making sure, doing what they can, even though I don't know what you can do, right? The Pac-12, the new commissioner out there, that poor guy. I think he just hit a year on the job. He was saying recently about the alliance between the ACC and the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. Strong. We're strong here. We're committed to each other. Remember that ridiculous thing? They banded together to make sure that basically not increase the college football playoff to allow other SEC teams in there. And how long did that last now? The alliance. You're in an alliance with a conference who just stole your two top teams, your two top programs. Thanks a lot. You're an alliance. But the effects across the country, man, where this thing's going to go for college football, to not have some traditional rivalries absolutely stinks. But I think we've seen in the last several years, I mean, we saw a year with no Clemson and South Carolina football in the state of South Carolina for the first time in 100-plus years. Things didn't fall apart. The world continued. Texas and Texas A&M haven't played for how many years now? We have moved on. And kind of in an odd, ironic way, it looks like that rivalry might be coming back and might mean that much more now if it's an SEC game. But I don't know. Are you guys convinced? Are we destined now for two super conferences in what we consider major college sports? I am certainly considering it now more than I ever have. And I think the percentage in my head is certainly a lot higher after yesterday's news than it's ever been. But again, I think there's so much lack of cohesion, let's put it that way, amongst major college schools, major college programs out there, I'm still not convinced that's going to happen. That would take too much. It would take so much convincing and so many moves out there, so much adjustment. Just because the Big Ten's now up to 14 schools and the SEC is as well. I get it. That's 20. That's a lot of schools, man. Wait a second. Are we up to 16 though? Am I doing that math wrong? I think we're up to so many schools. Let's go that way. Right. Expanded now from 14 to 16. Up to so many schools. It is much more likely in my head now to happen than it's ever been. I always thought that was just a little, come on, hyperbolic. You guys are being dramatic. The breaking off of what we once called the Power 5 schools from the NCAA, I think that's been inevitable for a while. And I think we've, by and large, seen it, right? It just hasn't been official. And you let the group of five get a sniff of the college football playoff, or like Cincinnati made it and the whole thing. Like, you got a shot. It's cute. Always a cute story every year. But it's kind of unofficially been, it's happened for a while, at least in football. So I don't know if this is a clear sign to me. I think I'm still 70-30. No is my answer here, but the percentage chance of that probably went up from, it probably doubled with yesterday's news. I probably would have told you like 15% chance. I think we're going to get 2 super conferences anytime soon in major college sports. It's just so much has to happen, and the contracts are signed for so long. The ACC and the SEC and the Big Ten are making so much money. Don't quite see it. I don't think that the Pac-12, the Big 12 could make that happen or even want to make that happen. So I told you yesterday, 15% chance of that happening. Now, much more likely. Still not more likely than not, I think, in my head, but I'm up to about a 30% chance. And I'm hopeful that, again, this equals more good games. Saw the idea yesterday that I'd love to see, and this is not a brand new idea. I just saw it kind of repeated or maybe put out there that much more clearly so I can understand it. My non-soccer fan brain can understand the way that the Premier League and then the Champions League works in European soccer. You have a bunch of teams there, and you've got to kind of play your way into one league or another every year. If you don't play well, then you get relegated, you get dumped down to the lower league. Something like that. The idea of that, I've never taken to being a patriotic American and all. I say that tongue in cheek, just in case you can't see me shake my fist on the video live stream. But this makes me think that might be more of a reality moving forward. Like, that would be, if we're looking for competitive football games, good football games. If a good football game isn't Alabama just drubbing most of SEC schools, which has happened in the last several years. Georgia, I mean, the margin of victory last year, it's pretty embarrassing, really. If you're trying to sell any kind of parity in the best football conference in America, it just wasn't there. And it hasn't been there, really, recently. I get it. Texas A&M beat Alabama, and then A&M lost 4 other games last year. You can make a case, I guess. I'm just saying that the scores have gotten more and more out of hand as the college football playoff has kind of separated those 5 and 6 teams in the last several years. We haven't gotten closer to more parity. So TV networks and schools themselves, I don't think would want to see more blowout games. So the idea of that possibly happening one day, I think that's fascinating. I get it. I get why it works for European soccer that way, why it could work here. But again, just talking about that after yesterday, just being much more open to that than ever before, it just shows me what a monumental day yesterday was and a shift. And again, maybe it's because it's not happening to the SEC, can see it a little clearly from a South Carolina perspective, or automatically removed from it, makes me evaluate it a little bit differently. Because again, what does yesterday mean for the Gamecocks? I think very little, other than deeper appreciation to be in the Southeastern Conference, having already been out in front of this thing, and now seeing the Big Ten follow suit, to be a strong member or a member of such a strong conference. Deeper appreciation, especially knowing what Clemson has to be going through. The ACC is not that. Never has it been more obvious that there is a large separation between the Power 5 conferences and the top two. Again, I put the ACC at number 3 and then the bottom 2. I would think it might be the most difficult to be right there in the middle in that ACC spot, because you got to consider everything, right? You got to consider that your conference could be a lot like those bottom 2 real quick if you don't do something. You also got to consider, hey, I might want to be in one of those top 2 conferences. I think you're crazy to not have that thought process. Or if want is the bad word, I might need to be in one of those top 2 conferences just from a competitive standpoint. So to be out in front of that thing with the Gamecocks being in the SEC or being in the Big Ten right now, I think you have to feel pretty safe, even if you are still thrown for a loop a little bit by the news yesterday. And if you're in the ACC, I don't know how you feel. I don't know what would help you feel better about your security, make you feel more secure moving forward, that you can compete with those conferences year in and year out, and from a financial standpoint mainly. Would it take Notre Dame joining the conference? I just don't see that. That would certainly help, right? But I don't see Notre Dame doing that. And if you can be independent as we sit here on July 1st, 2022, what is it going to take for you to join a conference? I don't see anything the ACC could do without, again, ticking off the rest of their members. I think maybe if you added them, it might add more instability, actually, because you would have to give them such a sweetheart deal that there's no way you could feel good about it if you're Clemson, for instance. I see you could feel good about it if you're Pitt, maybe. Virginia, Wake Forest. But Clemson's in such a different place and so much more valuable to the ACC right now. So, man, I don't know what kind of options there are out there. I don't know who they would pair up with exactly. Florida State or Miami seems the most obvious. If they were to jump to the SEC, could you imagine? I mean, from an SEC perspective, that would be the most attractive move next, right? Say, all right, Big Ten, we see what you did there. We're going to grab Florida State and Clemson. Think about that. Let's keep this thing going. We see your pair. Raise you this pair. Then where would the Big Ten go after that? I mean, clearly, you go Washington and Oregon, right? If you're going West Coast, or does the SEC say that no? Now we're going to go to the West Coast too. You're not the only conference that's going to go all the way across the country. We're going to do it too. That would be more of an expansion move for sure from the SEC. But to me, the brand name power and the football power wouldn't be as good as Clemson and Florida State. and maybe that's just complete regionalism, right? But that's kind of also what has made the SEC special. Not that anybody really cares about that tradition much anymore, or don't let the messaging of conferences now try to trick you. Yesterday was the strongest signal ever, right? This is about money. And UCLA and Southern Cal will never be able to sell anything about the purity or the college, the student athlete experience or the whole thing, because man, they just completely shifted their paradigm. They are going 2 time zones over to play conference games, sometimes all 3, right? And then how will they break it down from here will be interesting to see what kind of news we get out of the Big Ten. Oh, what a day. What a shift. And what a year, a calendar year. I think this time last year, it hadn't even happened, the Texas and Oklahoma news. So such a major shift in so many ways. And then what will follow? Again, last year, it was a minor reaction, I think, from the college football world or the college sports world in general that, yeah, the Big 12 did go out and get a few more teams in their conference. They did some damage control. And I think those smaller schools that they ended up bringing in there, Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, one other that I always forget for some reason. It's good for them to join a larger conference. You feel like they're going to upgrade their bottom line and make some more money. And they they each have their kind of their selling points. Not bad, but it doesn't look like the Pac-10ish was already down towards the bottom of performance and finances when it came to the Power 5 conferences. So I don't know if they can get away with doing that, or if they do, I definitely think that Power 5 dynamic that we've always just kind of thrown out there. Yeah, they're Power 5. Knowing that there are bragging rights and the SEC and the Big Ten kind of gone back and forth recently, I think, from who's bringing in more revenue per school per year. The ACC hadn't been too far off, and they might have had a year or two in there where their money was way up there and in the argument or competing with those other 2 conferences. But then the Big 12 and the Pac-10 have been towards the bottom. But now it is the gap has never been wider, and you can't sell it as the Power 5 as I'm sitting here right now. And what happens next? Fascinating. Notre Dame, Oregon, Washington, Clemson to a lesser degree, I think, because of the ACC's media rights deal. I don't know how many options they got, but I'm sure the conversations are happening, and that now I don't know how. Again, kudos to UCLA, Southern Cal, and the Big Ten for keeping this thing as top secret as they did. Impressive. Massively impressive. The Texas-Oklahoma thing was similar, just not quite as streamlined. I mean, the news starting to creep out before noon yesterday, I think, and then, was it 6 hours later, maybe 8 hours later, confirmed in. Big Ten voted them in. So, impressive. Impressive from an information management perspective, and then a public messaging perspective, and all of that, right? UCLA Southern Cal joined the Big Ten. It wasn't just reports. It wasn't speculation yesterday. It was that at the beginning, and then hours later, done deal. 2024, putting a date on it. And are you guys like me? I know had my buddy Mike Gillespie on from ABC Columbia, and we were talking about the new ESPN deal, how it starts in 2024. We're like, oh, yeah, well, we absolutely think it's not going to be 2025 when Oklahoma and Texas start playing. It'll be 2024. The more we talked about it, the more sense it made, and totally came to that conclusion that day, and was more convinced of it, and more convinced of it. I'm even more convinced of it now. I guess that was going to be my original question. Does this make you guys think, like me, that there's no way we're going to get to 2025 before Texas and Oklahoma start playing in here? I think 2024 will absolutely be the year. Again, if UCLA and Southern Cal can do it in the Big Ten, I think the SEC looks over there and says, yeah, we're going to do that. I think that's been the plan really all along. You had to put the 2025 out there for legal reasons because of media rights there at the Big 12. And those schools will have to pay that conference to basically get out of that. But it's just money, right? And right now, the SEC, the Big Ten have plenty of it, and they'll figure it out, I think. And so I'm more convinced than ever that we'll see Texas and Oklahoma as SEC participants in 2024 now that UCLA and Southern Cal are set to do that in the Big Ten. So that might be the one thing I get out from any kind of real world perspective from a Gamecock effect yesterday. That it might make it easier for that to happen. But I thought that was going to happen yesterday, even before this news. But now I'm convinced of it, I think. I've gone from, I think that's really going to happen, a high probability of happening, to I'm convinced that's going to happen. The super conference thing I'm not convinced of. And I still am, I find it hard to believe there's a high probability it's going to happen just with everything that's still out there. That it won't surprise me at all. I have very little confidence in the Big 12 and the Pac-10-ish now surviving in a meaningful way. But the ACC, maybe it's just because I grew up near the old home office there in Greensboro, North Carolina. ACC basketball tournament in the Greensboro Coliseum as much as it was. Maybe I'm a little too close to that to see it any kind of close to objectively. But I find it hard to believe they're not going to put up a heck of a fight here and keep the two super conferences from happening. Could you have 3 super conferences? Does that make any sense? I mean, how much sense does having Missouri, Texas A&M, Texas, and Oklahoma in the Southeastern Conference? How much sense does it make to have a team from New Jersey and 2 teams from LA in your conference? Well, the Big East did this way back in the day, right? Had Miami in there. They went up and down the East Coast when they expanded with Virginia Tech and Miami. This first time around really in my lifetime that changed all of this, that started to change all of the alignment in college sports. Crazy, man. So fun to talk about, though. Another big topic today that has gone way on the back burner, and we'll talk about it more next week, and we'll do it with an authority. Hillary Cox over at South Carolina is in charge, really, has been in charge for a while now, and put at the top of the name, image, and likeness department, for lack of a better term. And she's going to join us sometime next week to talk about the major shift, or why it's a major shift in the Gamecock perspective today, and really the state of South Carolina, that the original law that was on the books in South Carolina that was supposed to help to facilitate name, image, and likeness for student athletes actually ended up limiting what schools could do, because the law got put on the books to try to help things out, assuming that the NCAA would try to do a policy across the country, or maybe a federal policy would be out there. And of course, the NCAA said, hey, what are we going to do? We're not going to do anything. And so it actually limited what the University of South Carolina could do the state law did. And now, as of today, July 1, 2022, that law has been suspended for the next year. So the University of South Carolina and the athletics department there can now help facilitate, can help be the middleman. Before they couldn't really do anything, right? Didn't even hardly talk about it, the whole thing. I mean, kind of ridiculous. Hey, great, you guys want to come play for us? Hey, did you hear about this new name, image, and likeness thing? Yeah, we can't say anything more about it now. But if you happen to know these people over here, they'll really tell you a lot about it. And it's a great deal. I don't know if you could say that technically, right? But, I mean, having people who have done it recently say that, yeah, that's the first thing. That's the first part of the conversation these days in recruiting. All right, what are the opportunities out there? And again, when that's reality, that's just going to be how it is now. But what happens today? I actually went on the website yesterday. I think they put it out there. But what goes into effect today is you can sign up as an individual or as a business on this Gamecock NIL exchange. And then you can go see profiles of athletes out there who are available, who are certainly putting their names and services out there to represent your business, to partner with a business, to earn money, to help that business get the word out, to represent the brands and all that stuff. So we'll get some more details from the person in charge over at USC. Hillary Cox is her name. She'll be on the show next week. But again, that has opened. You can go check it out. It's on Gamecocks Online. And the website is changing today to, I think, help stay competitive with other programs across the country who are clearly taking advantage of, who are using the name, image, and likeness opportunities out there to their advantage when it comes to recruiting. Texas A&M being example number one. LSU baseball, I think, impossible to see what they've been doing here recently and not presume that they're getting a bunch of guys great opportunities, let's say. Stuart Lake has told us, the former Gamecock assistant, that that's what it is right now in major college baseball. That those deals are out there in major college baseball for big-time players. 6-figure deals, he's been here, are out there for baseball players. So if it's out there for college baseball players, that basketball and football are off the charts, and that's where these recent reports of big-time recruits, the kid who committed to Miami, right, reportedly was offered $11 million to go to Florida and ended up going with $9.5 million at Miami. How much truth there is to that, I don't know. Tennessee reportedly has put $8 million attached to their new quarterback commit from the state of California. Crazy. But also crazy to think, I never thought I would see a school now selling the opportunity or being there to help sell their student athletes. I don't think we have to call them that anymore, right? They're athletes as ambassadors, brand ambassadors, spokespeople, representatives of businesses. Crazy. But clearly that's what you got to do. And it makes a lot of sense that South Carolina is doing this. And if you don't do this, then you get left behind. And this is where I do think it's helpful to have, younger isn't the right word, but that's the first one that popped in my head with Shane Beamer as your head football coach. You have to have a forward-thinking football coach, let's put it that way. And clearly, and this is why age isn't exactly right, like Dan Mullen isn't an over-the-hill kind of guy, but obviously he didn't want to think forward. He wasn't open-minded to thinking about how you start getting advantages, how you start getting out in front of this name, image, and likeness thing. I think he just got to the point where he's like, this is too much. I don't want to mess with this. This is not what I'm accustomed to. So Like, he was the opposite of forward thinking, I think, that way. His thinking was completely restricted to what he had always known and dealt with, and anything else was just going to be a pain in his butt, and he'd worry about it after the season, right? Basically said as much with recruiting, and that got him fired. That has gotten him out of college football, and how quickly that happened, talked about it yesterday. Just mind-boggling to me, and it's why Florida is in that my top 5 that I ended up coming up with yesterday of programs to watch. Most interesting programs out there in the SEC. We got Florida. I mean, look at the list there. 4. And in any other conference, they would be so much higher. It'd have to be at least 2, right? But the SEC has such a ridiculous environment right now, with Auburn being number 1, Brian Harsin on the tremendous hot seat after a disappointing year number 1. And we saw it up close and personal at Williams-Brice Stadium last year. Mike Bobo as the offensive coordinator. Now he's out. And Derek Mason was the defensive coordinator, and he had all kind of issues last year too. So the drama going around Auburn is even more dramatic than usual, which it's already probably the most dramatic environment in college sports to begin with. Then you got the LSU situation. I got them number 2, ranking the SEC programs to watch next year, just because of, I mean, Brian Kelly starting off with a fake Southern accent, and I'd put the news of him becoming the next LSU coach very similarly with how I reacted to the massive news yesterday of UCLA and Southern Cal. It was like, huh? Really? Wow. Didn't see that coming. I just assumed, and I think it's kind of how it's always been in my lifetime. And you get to be the head coach of Notre Dame, you're going to try to ride that thing as long as you can ride it until they ask you to leave and you're not performing at the level that you needed to perform at. You're not nationally relevant or challenging for championships. Brian Kelly had the program very much nationally relevant. And so that was surprising to me on that end, but more surprising to me on the other end. Maybe not more, but equally surprising on the other end, especially knowing that Billy Napier had been there, seemingly lying in wait, and Orgeron kind of imploded there. The championship celebration never stopped, seemingly. But the fit with Brian Kelly at LSU, and if Nick Saban hadn't won a national championship there, I would be banging my fist and doing that whole thing with the Urban Meyer move to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like, hey, man, this ain't going to work. Awful move. Don't know what you're thinking. But we have seen Nick Saban win a championship with the LSU. We've seen Nick Saban now take Alabama to what it is. So clearly you don't have to be that kind of guy. I mean, Ed Orgeron was Louisiana, is Louisiana. So also on the other end, just because you are doesn't mean it's going to be a great relationship forever. It was a championship run, and then it wasn't. And Brian Kelly has proven he's a really good football coach, and he knows how to run football programs. LSU is a different animal. How that works out, especially with you're going to keep trying to fake Southern accent. Good luck. Good luck with that. So that's why I put the number 2. Then you got Jimbo and Texas A&M at number 3. Everything that's happened in the offseason, what Texas A&M is and where they are now. A couple of seasons ago, just the one regular season loss right outside the college football playoff. Expecting to challenge for the West last year, beating Alabama, but then losing 4 games total. Now having puffed the chest out, number 1 recruiting class, nothing done wrong. Coach on the field talking to recruits about money. But knowing the expectation level at Texas A&M too, having given the national championship trophy, just filling the year to Jimbo and the boots and the whole deal. So I got them above Florida as well. But that Billy Napier situation, filling in for Dan Mullen and already hearing plenty of Gator fans not happy with some recruiting misses already. I mean, in just the first several months, man. But knowing Napier is, I don't even know how to describe him necessarily, but dynamic is one word to use, but that's not quite the right word I'm looking for. I think he's one of those either you love him or hate him kind of guys. And so how that's going to work at Florida, no clue. And then the fifth program that got me talking about this yesterday was Tennessee and Josh Heupel. Big-time progress in year one. Proven offensive coach that seems to have a formula worked out to score points. But now the Tennessee expectations coming along with that. And all this time, they've been mired in mediocrity with Jeremy Pruitt, Derek Dooley, Lane Kiffin, the disaster that was a year after the Phil Fulmer era. So those are my top five, again, SEC football programs to watch this year. Now we got this news on top of it. So I had already talked myself into yesterday that this is going to be the most fun year from an SEC football perspective for so many reasons, for the reasons for those programs to watch and all the drama involved in them, but then optimism around South Carolina and just the year two of the Shane Beamer era. But now college football as a whole, the shifting dynamic that was already involved with the University of Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC eventually. Now you got the UCLA Southern Cal jumping over the Big Ten thing. And we're all, I think, logically waiting for the next domino to fall. And last year it was the Big 12 scramble to keep that league together and then to go out and add a few more schools. Now the Pac-10 is in a similar type situation, but with maybe even more alarm, maybe more of a cause for concern now that it's the second tidal wave to hit college sports in the calendar year. And then you got other considerations out there, right? What about Clemson? What about Notre Dame? Oregon and Washington out there? What are they thinking? What kind of power, what kind of options do they have? All this combined with name, image, and likeness and transfer portal stuff. Wow, what a time to be alive. What a time to talk college football. Enjoy doing that with you all day long today, all week long. Next week, we'll get back to more of a normal schedule with get some scheduled guests in. And again, going to start some team-specific previews coming up and kind of deep dives into specific teams that will be very relevant to South Carolina and Clemson, and looking forward to doing that as we move on through July. But, man, July just changed a whole lot with the big news from yesterday from UCLA and Southern Cal. We will not be doing a show on Monday. We'll take the 4th of July off. I hope all of you have a great 4th of July weekend. We already got some, I don't know about around your area, but we already have some festivities going on July 1st today to kick the weekend off. We'll got it going on Saturday and then on Monday too. So it'll be a whole celebration, a whole deal, and hope you get to spend it with those that are most important to you. And as I sit here, having named this show Unrestricted Free Agent, talking about the free part of that being that much more important to me this year than it ever has. Certainly the 4th of July will probably ring that much more true this year than it ever has in my life. And will continue to do what I can on this show to promote freedom. And I appreciate you guys putting up with me hopping up on the soapbox every now and again and discussing those things back and forth, giving your perspectives on them. I think it's very important. Jason says, have a great weekend. Unrestricted free agents out there. Again, thanks for listening. Be back Tuesday, 8 a.m., live streaming from 8 to 10. and then get back on that normal schedule every day from 8 to 10 on the live stream. You can always catch it later on the video versions that automatically archive on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We got the Podbean version that's live audio, and then it shoots it out to the podcast platforms all over the place. So happy 4th of July weekend, and thanks for listening. Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent.